The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from over 100 different worlds sat in their designated seats, their bodies still, and their attention completely focused on the center of the room. Some of them breathed through gills. Others had no need to breathe at all. A few existed as clouds of intelligent gas contained within special chambers. But all of them, regardless of their biology or their history, watched the creature that had been brought before them with a mixture of curiosity and dread. The creature's name was Al. It belonged to a species called a race of four-legged beings covered in scales that shifted color with their emotions. Right now, those scales were a deep, dark blue, almost black. This color meant fear. They were not known for being afraid of anything. They had served as the warrior caste of the Dominion for over 10,000 years. They had conquered planets. They had destroyed civilizations. They had watched stars die and felt nothing but satisfaction. But Al was afraid. The creature stood on a raised platform in the center of the chamber, its four legs trembling slightly beneath a body that bore the scars of recent trauma. Three eyes, arranged in a triangle on its flat face, moved constantly, scanning the assembled delegates as if searching for threats. A translation device had been implanted in its throat, allowing it to communicate with any species present. High Counselor rose from the central podium. Was an ancient being, its body composed entirely of living crystal that had grown and evolved over millions of years. Light refracted through its form, casting rainbow patterns across the nearby delegates. When it spoke, its voice was like the chiming of bells, beautiful and terrible at the same time. Al of the began, "You have requested an audience with this council. You claim to have information of vital importance to every species in the known galaxy. You claim to be the sole survivor of the Dominion fleet, the largest and most powerful military force ever assembled. You claim to have witnessed things that will change our understanding of the universe forever." The High Counselor paused, allowing its words to echo through the chamber. "The Dominion fleet consisted of 12,000 warships," continued. "It had never been defeated in battle. It had conquered 17 civilizations across 4 galactic sectors, and yet you stand before us alone. You are the only survivor. You alone return to tell us what happened." Al's scales flickered, momentary patches of red appearing among the blue. Red meant anger, or perhaps shame. It was difficult to tell. "That is correct, High Counselor," Al replied. Its voice was rough, damaged by something more than just the physical wounds it had suffered. "I am the last. All others are dead or captured. The Dominion fleet no longer exists. The Dominion itself no longer exists. Everything we built over 10,000 years has been destroyed." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several delegates shifted in their seats, exchanging worried glances with their neighbors. The Dominion had been the dominant power in this region of the galaxy for longer than most species had existed. Its sudden destruction was like learning that gravity had stopped working, or that the stars had gone dark. "How is this possible?" asked a delegate from the collective, a hive-mind species that communicated through chemical signals. What force could destroy the Dominion fleet? What enemy could be so powerful? Al turned its 3 eyes toward the delegate. For a long moment it said nothing. When it finally spoke, its voice was barely above a whisper. "Humans." The word hung in the air like a curse. Several delegates did not recognize it. Others had heard it only in passing, a name mentioned in astronomical surveys or exploration reports. But a few, those who had studied the more obscure regions of the galaxy, felt a chill run through whatever served as their spines. "Humans," repeated slowly. "You are referring to the species from the Sol system, the third planet from their star, a young race barely capable of leaving their own world." "Yes," Al confirmed. "That is where we found them, that is where we attacked them, and that is where they destroyed us." The High Counselor's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "The records indicate that the humans are a primitive species. They had not yet developed faster-than-light travel. They had not colonized any world beyond their own. They were classified as a pre-contact civilization, too young and too weak to pose any threat to established powers. Made a sound that might have been a laugh, though it contained no humor. That is what we believed as well, they said. That is what the Dominion High Command concluded when they reviewed the intelligence reports. A small world, a young species, barely capable of reaching their own moon. We thought it would be an easy conquest. We thought we would add another slave race to the Dominion's collection and move on to more important matters. Al's scales shifted again, patches of deep purple appearing among the blue and red. Purple was a color the council delegates had never seen on it before. Later, they would learn that it represented a combination of respect and terror, an emotion so rare among them that their language barely had a word for it. "We were wrong," Al continued. "We were more wrong than we had ever been about anything in our entire history. The humans are not primitive. They are not weak. They are not harmless. They are the most dangerous species in the known galaxy, and we were fools to ever challenge them." The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted questions, demanded explanations, expressed disbelief. The Dominion fleet had crushed civilizations far more advanced than Earth. It had defeated enemies with technology that made human achievements look like children's toys. The idea that a pre-contact species could destroy such a force was absurd, impossible, ridiculous. Raised a crystalline appendage, and slowly the chamber fell quiet once more. "You will explain," the High Counselor said. "It was not a request. You will tell us everything, from the beginning, leave nothing out. The survival of every species in this chamber may depend on what you have to say." Lowered its head in acknowledgement. Then it began to speak. The story started 3 standard galactic cycles ago, in a region of space that the Dominion had designated as Sector 7G. This was the outer edge of Dominion territory, an area that had been largely ignored because it contained nothing of value. No habitable worlds, no useful resources, just a collection of unremarkable stars and barren planets. But the Dominion's long-range sensors had detected something interesting. Radio signals, artificial electromagnetic emissions coming from a small yellow star about 12,000 light-years from the Dominion's core systems. The signals were crude and primitive, broadcasting in patterns that clearly indicated intelligent origin. Someone was out there, shouting into the void, completely unaware of who might be listening. The Dominion High Command reviewed the discovery with mild interest. New species were always useful. They could be enslaved to work in the mines and factories that powered the Dominion's economy. They could be conscripted into the military to serve as cannon fodder in the endless wars of expansion. At the very least, they could be studied to see if their biology or technology offered anything worth stealing. A probe was dispatched to investigate. It took several cycles to reach the target system, and when it arrived, it began transmitting data back to the Dominion. The information it gathered painted a picture of a species that should have posed no threat whatsoever. The humans lived on the 3rd planet from their star, a small world covered mostly in water. They had developed industrial technology only a few hundred years ago. They had invented nuclear weapons, but had somehow refrained from using them to destroy themselves. They had sent a few primitive spacecraft to their nearest celestial neighbors, but they had not established any permanent presence beyond their home world. Most importantly, they were divided. The human planet was not unified under a single government. Instead, it was split into nearly 200 separate nations, many of which were in conflict with each other. Wars were constant. Political tensions were high. The species seemed incapable of cooperating even for their own survival. The Dominion analysts who reviewed this data came to a unanimous conclusion. The humans would be easy prey. Their internal divisions would prevent any unified response to invasion. Their primitive technology could not possibly stand against Dominion weapons. The conquest would be quick, clean, and profitable. paused in its testimony, its three eyes focusing on something distant, something that only it could see. I was young then, the admitted, fresh from the military academies, eager to prove myself in battle. When I learned that I had been assigned to the invasion fleet, I was excited. I thought it would be a simple mission, a chance to gain experience without any real danger. The scales flickered with that strange purple color again. I did not understand what we were about to face. None of us did. The invasion fleet was assembled over the course of 2 cycles. 12,000 warships, ranging from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts capable of cracking planets. The Dominion had not deployed such a force in over a century. It was meant to demonstrate the full might of the Empire, to crush any resistance before it could form. Admiral commanded the fleet from the flagship Dominion's Pride, a vessel so large that it had its own internal weather systems. Was an old warrior, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, responsible for the subjugation of at least 5 civilizations. He approached the human invasion with the same cold efficiency he had applied to every other conquest. Al served as a junior tactical officer aboard the support cruiser Void Render. It was not a prestigious posting. Support cruisers stayed behind the main battle line, providing logistics and communications rather than engaging in direct combat. But Al did not mind. It gave the young a chance to observe everything, to learn how the Dominion military operated at the highest levels. The fleet departed from the Dominion's central systems and began the long journey toward the human world. Faster-than-light travel allowed them to cross the vast distances of space in a matter of cycles, but even so, the journey was not quick. There was time to train, to prepare, to review intelligence reports and plan strategies. During this time, Al began to study the humans in greater detail. It was partly out of curiosity and partly out of a desire to understand the enemy they would soon face. What the young found was confusing at first, then troubling, and finally, genuinely disturbing. The humans were not like any species Al had studied before. Other civilizations that the Dominion had conquered shared certain characteristics. They valued peace. They sought to avoid conflict. When threatened, they either surrendered immediately or attempted to negotiate. Those few who chose to fight did so defensively, trying to protect their homes and families while hoping for a resolution that would end the violence. The humans were different. The humans seemed to actively seek out conflict. Their history was an endless series of wars, fought over territory, resources, religion, ideology, and sometimes for reasons that made no sense at all. They had developed weapons of mass destruction capable of ending all life on their planet, and they had come terrifyingly close to using them on multiple occasions. They glorified their warriors. They told stories of great battles and heroic last stands. They seemed to view war not as a tragedy to be avoided, but as a natural and even desirable state of existence. Brought these observations to its commanding officer, a senior named Commander Al. The commander listened patiently, then dismissed the concerns with a wave of a scaled appendage. "You are overthinking this," Al said. "Yes, the humans fight among themselves. Many primitive species do. It means nothing. When they face a true external threat, they will either unite and be crushed, or remain divided and be crushed even more easily. Either way, the outcome is the same." Wanted to argue, to point out that the humans' constant warfare might have made them better at fighting rather than worse. But junior officers did not argue with commanders. So Al remained silent and hoped that Al was right. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human solar system, near the orbit of a small, distant dwarf planet. Admiral ordered the ships to hold position while scouts moved ahead to gather updated intelligence. The information from the original probe was several cycles old. Things might have changed. The scouts returned with data that only reinforced the Dominion's confidence. The humans were still confined to their single planet. They had a few small stations in orbit, and some automated probes scattered around their solar system, but nothing that could possibly threaten a military fleet. Their most advanced spacecraft were clumsy chemical rockets that took years to reach even the nearest planets. Admiral ordered the fleet to advance. The journey inward took several days. The human solar system was not large by cosmic standards, but even at speeds, it required time to cross. The Dominion ships passed the outer gas giants, massive worlds of hydrogen and helium that swirled with endless storms. They passed the asteroid belt, a ring of rocky debris that marked the boundary between the outer and inner system. They passed the red world that the humans called Mars, a cold and barren place that bore the scars of ancient geological activity. Throughout this approach, the Dominion broadcast its demands. The messages were transmitted on every frequency the humans were known to use, translated into their major languages, repeated continuously so that there could be no possibility of misunderstanding. "People of Earth," the message said, "you are now subjects of the Dominion. Your planet and all its resources belong to us. Your people will serve us in whatever capacity we require. Resistance is futile and will be met with overwhelming force. Surrender immediately and you will be treated with the minimal amount of cruelty. Resist and you will be destroyed. This is your only warning." The Dominion had sent similar messages to 17 civilizations before. 14 had surrendered immediately. 3 had attempted to resist and had been crushed within days. The pattern was well established. The outcome was inevitable. The humans did not respond. At first, the Dominion commanders assumed that the primitives simply lacked the technology to receive and understand the messages. Perhaps their communication systems were even more backward than the intelligence reports suggested. Perhaps they needed more time to translate the demands into their countless languages. But as the fleet drew closer to Earth, it became clear that the humans had received the message, and they had chosen not to answer. This was unusual. Species facing imminent conquest typically reacted in predictable ways. They panicked, they begged, they surrendered, they asked for terms, they did something. The human silence was strange, unsettling. It was as if they did not care that the most powerful military force in the galaxy was approaching their world. Admiral was not concerned. Silence could mean many things. Perhaps the humans were simply too stunned to respond. Perhaps their governments were still debating how to react. Perhaps they were paralyzed by fear, unable to comprehend the doom that was approaching. It did not matter. In a few more days, the fleet would reach Earth, and the conquest would begin regardless of whether the humans chose to cooperate or not. Al, watching from the observation deck of the Void Render, was not so certain. Something about the human silence felt wrong. It did not feel like the silence of a paralyzed prey animal. It felt like something else entirely. It felt like the silence of a predator, waiting for its prey to come closer. The young tried to dismiss this feeling as paranoia. The humans were primitive. Their technology was crude. They had no way to threaten the Dominion fleet. And yet the feeling persisted, a cold weight in Al's chest that grew heavier with each passing day. The fleet crossed the orbit of the fourth planet, the red world the humans called Mars. They were now entering the inner solar system, the region where the human presence was strongest. Scanners detected increased electromagnetic activity from Earth, signs that the planet's inhabitants were aware of the approaching threat and were reacting to it. Admiral ordered the fleet to assume combat formation. This was standard procedure when approaching a potentially hostile world. The warships spread out, creating overlapping fields of fire that could cover each other against attack. The support vessels, including the Void Render, fell back to the rear of the formation, where they would be protected during any engagement. It was at this moment, with the fleet arranged in perfect order, with every ship in its assigned position, with 12,000 weapon systems armed and ready, that the first explosion occurred. The destroyer Crimson Fang simply vanished. One moment it was there, a sleek and deadly vessel in the third row of the formation. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of debris, a brief flash of light that faded almost before anyone could register what had happened. Confusion swept through the fleet. Sensors had detected nothing. No enemy ships, no incoming projectiles, no energy signatures that might indicate a weapon discharge. The Crimson Fang had been destroyed by something invisible, something that had given no warning whatsoever. Before anyone could react, the second explosion occurred. Then the third. Then a fourth, fifth, and sixth, all in rapid succession. Ships across the formation were being destroyed, torn apart by forces that the Dominion's advanced sensors could not detect or identify. Admiral ordered an immediate halt. The fleet stopped its advance, every ship holding position while scanners swept the surrounding space. What they found was almost impossible to believe. The space around the fleet was filled with objects, millions of them, small packages of metal and explosives, drifting silently in the void, completely invisible to casual observation. They had no power signatures because they had no engines. They had no heat signatures because they were as cold as the surrounding space. They had no electronic emissions because they were entirely passive, waiting in silence for something to come close enough to trigger their sensors. The humans called them mines. They had seeded the space around their solar system with weapons designed to destroy any ship that approached. Some of the mines were centuries old, launched in the earliest days of human and left to drift in darkness ever since. Others were more recent, deployed by automated systems that the Dominion had dismissed as primitive probes. The Dominion fleet had walked directly into a trap that had been laid generations before they even knew Earth existed. Al watched from the observation deck as more ships died. The mines were not particularly powerful individually, but there were so many of them, and they were positioned so cleverly that avoiding them all was nearly impossible. Every time a ship tried to maneuver away from one threat, it blundered into another. 23 vessels were destroyed before the fleet managed to establish a safe perimeter. The losses were small compared to the total size of the fleet, but they represented more casualties than the Dominion had suffered in its last 10 conquests combined. Admiral was furious. This was not how conquests were supposed to go. Primitive species were supposed to cower and submit, not fight back with hidden weapons and clever traps. The Admiral ordered every mine within sensor range to be destroyed, clearing a path through the deadly field so the fleet could continue its advance. This took time. The mines were small and numerous, and destroying them required precision fire that could not be rushed. While this was happening, the fleet remained stationary, exposed, waiting. And the humans were not idle. Was the first to spot them. The young had been watching the sensors, tracking the mine clearance operation when something new appeared at the edge of the display. Contact signatures, lots of them, coming from the direction of Earth. Ships approaching, Al reported, voice tight with sudden tension. Count is still increasing, 50, 100, 150, 200 plus. Commander Al moved to examine the sensor data, scales rippling with surprise. What are they? The answer came as the approaching vessels grew closer, and their details became clear. They were human ships, military vessels, launched from the planet below, racing toward the Dominion fleet at speeds that should have been impossible for their level of technology. The human ships were small. Most of them were barely larger than Dominion fighters, and even the largest was a fraction of the size of a proper warship. Their designs were crude and utilitarian, lacking the elegant curves and smooth lines that characterized Dominion vessels. They looked like machines built for a single purpose, with no thought given to aesthetics or comfort. They also looked fast, very fast. Their engines burned with a fierce blue light that spoke of power far beyond what the Dominion had expected. Chemical rockets, the intelligence reports had said, primitive and slow. These were something else entirely. These were weapons of war. The human fleet was led by a single vessel that stood out from the rest. It was larger than the others, though still small by Dominion standards, and it bore markings that clearly identified it as a command ship. Later, the Dominion would learn its name, Endurance, and they would learn to fear it. Admiral assessed the approaching threat and found it wanting. 200 ships against 12,000. Even with the losses from the minefield, the odds were absurdly in the Dominion's favor. The admiral ordered the fleet to prepare for engagement, confident that this battle would be over in minutes. The human ships did not slow down as they approached. They did not spread out into a defensive formation. They did not attempt to engage at long range, where the Dominion's superior weapons would have given them an insurmountable advantage. Instead, they accelerated. They dove directly at the heart of the Dominion fleet, engines blazing, on a collision course with the largest and most powerful vessels in the formation. Al watched in disbelief as the human ships closed the distance. This was not how space combat was supposed to work. Proper naval engagements were fought at range, with carefully aimed weapons and calculated maneuvers. Ships did not simply charge at each other like primitive ground warriors. It was reckless, suicidal, insane. The Dominion weapons opened fire. Thousands of energy beams and guided projectiles lanced out toward the approaching humans, filling the space between the two fleets with deadly light. Many of the human ships were hit. Many were destroyed, vanishing in brief flashes of fire and debris. But they kept coming. The survivors did not turn back. They did not break formation. They simply adjusted course to avoid the wreckage of their fallen comrades and continued their charge, weapons firing as they closed the final distance. The first human ship reached the Dominion formation. It was a small craft, barely larger than a shuttle, piloted by a single human. It should have been an easy target, a gnat to be swatted aside by the mighty warships surrounding it. Instead, it flew directly into the engine section of the battleship Eternal Glory and exploded. The force of the explosion was far greater than the small ship's size should have allowed. It tore through the battleship's armor, penetrated deep into its power systems, and triggered a chain reaction that split the massive vessel in two. The Eternal Glory, a ship that had survived a dozen battles against far more advanced enemies, was destroyed in seconds by a single human pilot who had chosen to die rather than retreat. Stared at the sensor display, unable to process what had just happened. Suicide attacks. The humans were using suicide attacks. They were deliberately sacrificing their lives to destroy Dominion ships, trading one for one in a battle they could not possibly win through conventional means. And they were not stopping. All across the formation, human ships were making similar runs, targeting the largest and most valuable vessels, driving themselves into engines and weapon systems and command bridges. Each attack cost the humans a ship and a pilot, but it also cost the Dominion something they could not easily replace. The Dominion fleet had been built for efficiency and power, not for this kind of close-range chaos. The warships were designed to fight at distance, where their superior weapons could be brought to bear. Up close, surrounded by enemies who seemed to have no fear of death, they were vulnerable in ways their designers had never anticipated. Commander Al grabbed Al by the shoulder, scales flashing with urgent colors. "Get to the communications center," the commander ordered. "Send a message to the High Command. Tell them what is happening here. Tell them everything." Hesitated. "But the battle is not over. We still outnumber them. Surely we can still win." Al's scales went dark, almost black. "Look at them," the commander said, gesturing toward the sensor display. "Look at how they fight. They are not trying to win. They are trying to make us pay the highest possible price for our victory, and they are succeeding." Al looked. The young saw human ships weaving through the formation, too fast and too maneuverable for the Dominion weapons to track. It saw explosions blooming across the fleet as more pilots chose death over retreat. It saw the ordered formation dissolving into chaos as captains tried to protect their ships from enemies who seemed to come from every direction at once. And it saw something else, something that would haunt Al for the rest of its life. A human ship, badly damaged, one engine destroyed, trailing debris and fire, dragging itself toward the battleship Void Crusher. The ship was clearly dying. Its pilot must have been injured or perhaps already dead from the damage it had sustained. Any rational being would have ejected, would have tried to save themselves even as their vessel was destroyed. But the human ship did not stop. It kept going, kept fighting, kept crawling toward its target with a determination that all logic. And when it finally reached the Void Crusher, when it finally drove itself into the massive ship's command bridge, it was still firing, still fighting, still refusing to give up even in the final moments of its existence. Al turned and ran for the communications center. The young did not know if the message would reach the high command in time. It did not know if anything could be done to save the fleet. But it knew, with a terrible certainty, that everything the Dominion believed about the universe was wrong. The humans were not primitive, they were not weak, they were not easy prey. They were something else entirely, something the galaxy had never seen before. And they were just getting started. The battle raged for hours. The Dominion fleet, for all its power and numbers, could not adapt to the human tactics quickly enough. Every time the admirals developed a counter to one attack pattern, the humans changed their approach. They were creative, unpredictable, willing to try anything, no matter how dangerous or unconventional. They used their own destroyed ships as weapons, ramming debris into Dominion vessels. They deployed clouds of metallic chaff that confused sensors and disrupted targeting systems. They sent out false signals that made it appear there were more ships than actually existed. They exploited every weakness, every gap in the Dominion's defenses, with a tactical brilliance that spoke of generations of military experience. And always they kept coming. No matter how many ships they lost, no matter how many pilots died, they never retreated, they never surrendered. They simply kept fighting with a ferocity that made them look like pacifists by comparison. By the time the battle finally ended, the Dominion fleet had lost over 3,000 ships. The human fleet had been effectively destroyed, reduced to a handful of crippled vessels that limped back toward their planet. But they had accomplished something that no other species had ever achieved. They had hurt the Dominion, really truly hurt them. Admiral surveyed the wreckage of the battle with something close to disbelief. Nearly a quarter of the fleet was gone, not captured, not disabled, gone, destroyed by a species that was not supposed to be able to fight back at all. The Admiral's first instinct was to withdraw, to pull the remaining ships back to the edge of the solar system and request reinforcements. But Dominion doctrine did not allow for retreat. Withdrawal would be seen as weakness, and weakness was not tolerated in the Dominion military. Besides, even with its losses, the fleet still vastly outnumbered anything the humans could field. Ordered the advance to continue, Earth awaited, the conquest would proceed. But as the fleet moved deeper into the solar system, passing the orbit of Mars and entering the region where the human presence was strongest, Al could not shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. The humans had been outnumbered 50-1, and they had still managed to destroy 3,000 ships. What would happen when the fleet reached their home world? What other surprises did they have waiting? Al did not know the answers to these questions, but the young suspected that the Dominion was about to find out, and that the cost of that knowledge would be far higher than anyone had imagined. The fleet pressed on, leaving behind a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen bodies. Ahead, the blue world of Earth hung in the darkness, a small point of light that seemed utterly unremarkable. It was anything but. The humans were watching, they were waiting, and they were ready. The real battle had not yet begun.